Donnie, and then the woman in the third row. Sorry. Oh, you're coming over here.
Yeah, well, I think it was easier. Okay, anyway, thank you for coming to Enfield. You can see how it's a tough town, and John gets this once a month, so don't feel bad. Mostly I got some comments because the chairman's a tough act to follow.
You guys give him this once a month. I actually should be buying you dinner. That's awesome that you do this to him once a month.
A few comments with the car tax. It's even worse for Enfield because we have 5 separate fire districts, and a lot of our money comes from car taxes. We have a lot of renters, people in apartment complexes, condos, they rent them. So now, if that goes through, all the fire districts, we're going to have to raise our mill rates, which goes onto the taxes higher, so it's a double dip here in Enfield. That's going to hurt us. On the MBR, I know you're just trying to be nice about the inner cities, but if the MBR works in the inner cities, why is it that most of them graduate less than 50% of their students? MBR is not working, and that should be something you can bring forward to prove it doesn't work. It's just hurting, 155 other towns. The other thing is talking about too many regulations on business people. I mean, I've never seen it in 35 years in business. This is the worst I've ever seen it. It's absolutely terrible. And compromising over the years, too. As I got more involved 5 years ago in the Republican Party, it seems that the Republicans go to Hartford and they make a little deal and they say, we'll compromise, we'll give you 5%. Well, after 10 years, that's 50%. And that's why this has gone so far the other way that I don't know how it's going to come back. I mean, we'll fight for it. We'll try to get it back. The other thing is the Republican Party itself. I'm going to try to be nice about this. I started going down to Hartford about 5, 6 years ago, John, and getting involved, and not just on things that were for my business, but I sat in on some of John's committees and hearings, and excellent job. And both you guys do a great job. Thank you for your leadership. I think you do a great job down there, Senator. But I've noticed on some of these boards, you're watching up there, and when they're talking, the Republicans sound like Democrats. And I look at the list, I say, that's a Republican. So I think that, and I'll give you an example. It came up right here about Oz Griebel. Oz Griebel ran for governor, came to Enfield as a Republican, wanted our support. Well, after the race was over for governor, I see him on TV, and there he is, all smiles, supporting the bus from New Britain to Hartford. And I says, we almost voted for this guy as governor, as a Republican. So I think the search is on that we have a problem who we send to Hartford and to Washington. But right now, a lot of the Republicans I see down there, and I've watched on some of the bills I fought for, and thank you because you supported me at the end, and John, but some of my biggest problems there were the Republican Party. And these are supposed to be pro-business people, and you listen to them talk, and you think they're Democrats without a doubt. But again, thank you for coming to Enfield.
Well, thank you.
Good place to start if somebody's thinking of running for governor.
Yeah. Well, I don't know who that is, but look, here's what I'm not going to let you get away with. I'm not going to let you get away with blaming the problems on the Republicans in the legislature, because we've fought them. But if you're a taxpayer, if you're a business owner, and you know the overregulation that happens and the overtaxation, I mean, we talk about a lot of issues regarding your business, but you know the difference in the taxes we impose on your product in Massachusetts. You should be looking for help in any party. It doesn't matter. And if people are helping you out and voting the right way, I don't care what party they're from. Support them. But look, I know we're going to come out ahead on that, Marianne. But the bottom line is we need more people in Hartford who are willing to make tough decisions in both parties. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Ginny Austin from Enfield. I have a question on the first slide that you showed, and it between the inflation rate and then the state spending rate. What caused that type of spending to go so far out of whack? And it started back in 2000. So we're talking, this is not a year, a problem this year. It's been a problem for 12 years.
It's been a problem for
longer than that, obviously,
20,
but it's
years.
Very large when you start looking around 2000. And it just has continued.
It's everything. We've increased spending across the board in every agency and every program that we have. And it's annual increases, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7%. And it doesn't matter what agency it is. And that's the trend we have to stop.
And then I go back to, I know when people have said, well, why don't we just do a straight cut across the board of each one of the agencies? And I also like the idea of having, a bipartisan discussion so that it's not, one side then the other, and then where do we go from here? Because, yes, we're here tonight, but what can we do about it? I just don't want to sit here and complain and hear all this. What are the next steps that we can take as citizens of the state of Connecticut to make a change?
The best thing you can do is talk to your friends, neighbors, social media, whatever it is. Tell them, do you know that the governor's proposed, if you agree with me, a 9.6% spending increase over the next 2 years. I guarantee you there isn't a first selectman in any of the towns represented here who've proposed that kind of spending increase,
And
whether
then
they're Democrat or Republican. So why are we increasing spending so much, and start to demand answers?
And because I think the other thing, and I appreciate this presentation, I see this as what I call a broad brush, and where are the details? So that when I look at this and say, okay, what is caused this great inflation? And then when I look at where the piece of the pie, everything that's being spent, well, what are the programs in there? What's going on? And I think it goes back to, do we need someone as an oversight?
And this is a broad brush, and I think I opened admitting that. We have, as Republicans, John and I, sat down with the other Republicans in our caucus and the Republicans in the House, and literally gone over every single line item in the state budget to see where we can spend less. And we've offered budgets for the last 5 years that have not raised taxes and have been balanced. And we've made some tough decisions. Now, when we talk about some things are out of our control or not, technically they are, but maybe they're not. For example, one of the things that Governor Malloy promised when he announced and then passed his last budget, if you remember, he called it shared sacrifice. I'm going to ask you to pay more in taxes so we can balance a budget. I'm going to ask state employees to give more so we can balance a budget. And I'm going to cut spending in state government. He didn't cut spending in state government. I think we've kind of proven that. He promised $1.6 billion in savings from state employees. We got almost half that. And of course, we all know we got the tax increases. In addition to social services, if you're going to look at one of our larger cost drivers as a state, it's employees. It's employees. We're going to have to make tough decisions about the health care, pension, and benefits that employees have, and start saying that maybe they need to look more like what's given in the private sector than what they have now. And I don't mean that as a criticism of state employees. They're good, hardworking people. But 30, 40 years ago, when this system, was working, people understood they were getting paid less and sacrificing to be a state employee, and they got better job security, probably better vacation time, and better pension and benefits. That's not true anymore.
Correct. But of course, contracts are renegotiated, so I don't know why those changes haven't been made for the last 12 years.
The governor is the one who was very critical of the 20-year contract that Governor Rowland approved, that the Democrats in the legislature approved as well. The other thing, just so you know, when a governor engages in contract negotiations and there's a new contract with one of the state bargaining units, the legislature doesn't have to vote on it. By not voting, we approve it. And every year we get up there and say, we demand we vote on these contracts. And they say no. And then you'll see legislators come up and say, I can't do anything about this part of the budget because that's all contracts. Contracts that by not voting for them, they've put their approval on. I think we should vote on every contract and be named. And that way we can't blame a governor. We can't blame somebody else who's not here for that responsibility and be held accountable. But look, absolutely. Do I think we can trim back the number of state employees to save money? I do. Do I think we can change the health care, pension, and benefit structures like so many of our towns are, looking at maybe going to a defined contribution plan instead of a defined benefit plan for new hires? Yes, I do. Do I think that's long-term where we need to be? I do.
Thank you.
Can we go with a woman right here?
Hi, my name is Ann Brislin, and I'm from Enfield.
Hi, Ann.
I have a couple of suggestions on how we can balance the budget. One would be to consolidate all of the commissions on the status of every different kind of minority into one commission. By the way, the state of Massachusetts does that. Why do we keep mentioning the state of Massachusetts tonight? They have the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination. They don't have one for Latinos, one for women, one for every different kind of minority or special interest. And we know in Connecticut, every time we have one of those offices, it's a six-figure salary with an operating budget. If we consolidated that into one office and then sent satellite offices out to Waterbury and New Haven and New London and just hired our best young lawyers who do arbitration and housing and fair housing law and gave jobs to lawyers who are going to be coming out looking for jobs, as opposed to cronies of the governor, we would save money. Oh, and they could repay their student loans. Here's another way. When my mother went into special care, in other words, she went into a nursing home and went to Title 19, my brother took care of the finances. We spent every single dollar from the sale of her home into assisted living, and we notified the Department of Social Services. She now qualifies. My brother and sister were her powers of attorney. She went into the nursing home, and they said, we'll take her. Her bill did not get paid. My brother called the Department of Social Services, weekly, bi-weekly. Guess when the Department of Social Services finally got in touch with him? 3 months after she was already deceased. Fortunately, the nursing home kept her. And they said, yes, we see she qualifies, and we're billing them. I think there needs to be some more accountability in some of these state agencies, and that there need to be some efficiencies. And that's just one example. I hear more and more examples from people all the time. Another good example of how we could save money. What about I understand that at 39 Woodland Street, that we once had the chancellor of the state university system. Now we have the trustees. All of those huge and appalling pay raises that went into effect that were not supposed to go into effect should be taken back. Excuse me, those were illegal raises. And then maybe we should allow our in-state students to be paying an in-state fare fee and be charging more for out-of-state students. That's just my opinion.
Well, thank you, and you know, you raise good points. We might have hope on the legislative commissions. They're actually the legislative commissions, not part of the executive branch. We've proposed in our Republican budgets to consolidate them to one commission, which I think is a fair compromise position, quite candidly. I'm not sure you need them at all, but the governor's actually put in his budget to consolidate the commissions. So if the Republicans want to do it and the governor wants to do it and it doesn't happen, I think we finally, you know, at least have one shining example of who we can actually blame for that. So let me get someone who hasn't asked a question yet. Can I, is there someone over here? Ma'am, you've had your hand up. Go ahead.
My question would be is that all of the taxes, all of the issues that are impacted. Okay, I'm sorry. All right. If you didn't hear it, Susan Reagan.
I did, thank you.
Okay, all right. All of the issues, all of the problems, all of the taxes, all of these things impact not only the conservatives and the Republicans and the independents, but they impact the people who are on the Democratic side as well. Now, what I don't understand is, are there trade-offs that you can do that you can speak to your colleagues across the aisle? And these things are not just going to impact the people that we feel this way. They're going to impact each individual. Democrats also own businesses and have kids in school and have all the usual issues that people face. So what I don't understand is why are the realities of what will happen don't seem to get through to them? Because we seem to understand it, but they don't.
Well, look, I mean, again, I don't disagree with you. I sat on the Finance Committee for many years in the legislature. We had debates over bringing back the estate tax or the death tax. And, you know, I come from Fairfield, Connecticut, part of Fairfield County. And I love to tell the story about how the first time I was campaigning for office, I knocked on the door that someone who's been friends with my parents forever. They were going to vote for me. Surefire, no problem. Knocked on the door. It was a Saturday. The gentleman said, "John, I'm very sorry, can't vote for you." And nobody wants to hear that, right? And I said, "Why? You know, it's the first time I'm running for office. What do I do?" He said, "Well, we live in Florida. That's where we vote." And the reality is, there are people who've been very successful who make money that most of us can't even fathom. But they can also move wherever they want to move. And tax policy has an impact on them. tax policy has an impact on businesses. About when you raise corporate taxes, that small business person may say, you know what, I'm not going to hire that next person I was going to do because I have to pay these state taxes. Or there's an overburdening of regulation. I need to comply with them. I can't go hire that next person or two to expand my business and lower unemployment. It has an impact. And the truth is, there are a majority of legislators who don't believe that. There are a majority of legislators who don't believe that tax policy and regulatory policy will have businesses leave, even in the face of every day we're reading news. MetLife, 2,600 jobs. This week alone, every week, every month, we're hearing about a corporate citizen reducing their footprint or eliminating their footprint in the state of Connecticut. And people just don't agree with that. They don't believe it's true.
Well, because Connecticut is the leader, it would seem, for every reason to leave this state. And there seems to be no pride on the Democratic side to feel that the profile of Connecticut is one of the worst in the entire United States. There seems to be no pride in trying to, because they're eroding their own profile by doing this.
There are a lot of people that don't get it. So, yep. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. Go ahead.
My name is Sam.
And we will. Excuse me, Sam. We will make sure we get to, and John, you can help me out answering some of these questions if you want. But
You're doing a great job.
we will make sure we got to everybody. And I know it might. I don't know what time it is, but I don't think they'll kick us out of the room. But if you have to get up and leave, please. You're not being rude by doing so, and we appreciate you coming. Yes, sir.
My name is Sam Snyder. I come from Summers. This chart, state government has grown too large. Voters need to get upset in order to vote out people who do not conform to what all of us or most of us in this room believe in. I would like to see you add a line to this, and that is state government total compensation cost for state employees. From start to end, every voter in this state knows their own situation with regard to compensation. They know what their own situation was 10 years ago, 5 years ago. They know if their pay has been flat or slightly up, or whether it's keeping pace with inflation or not. And you publicize this. It's not enough to tell it to us. Something like this chart has to go out to everybody. Everybody. And it seems to me that the Republican Party in the state ought to support something like that because they can help pay for it.
Well, that's a good idea, and we will actually. It's actually a very good suggestion on a chart, looking historically over the number of state employees we have versus the population, total compensation cost,
Compensation is
salary plus health care plus benefits.
everything.
It's a good idea. So, yes, ma'am. Go ahead. Can we get a mic? Do you want to come up to the microphone? Okay. Sam, I have to be truthful, though. As much as I like your idea, these good people are going to put it together. So I'm not going to take credit for it, but we will get that slide in there.
My name is Susan Neep. I'm the former mayor of East Hartford and the president of the Federation of Connecticut Taxpayer Organizations, and delighted that you are having this forum this evening. I have one particular question, but I'd like to lead up to that, and as it relates to, I believe it was your question on the salaries and pensions and all of that. We have probably the most wonderful resource of any state in the country, and that is the state's transparency website. And if you just Google it, and you go to that website, you will see the wages, the benefits, and the total package for each employee that works in the state of Connecticut. And there are many ways that you can get that information. You can also check the pensions. You will also see the vendor payments that are made. So there's a lot of transparency as it relates to this issue. I also have to thank our mayor in the town of East Hartford, Marcia LeClaire, because I had asked that she provide a similar resource for the taxpayers of East Hartford, and she did. And I would ask that our legislators on the Hill in Hartford follow what Arizona has mandated. I believe it is Arizona. And if you went to our website, which is ctact.org, and you just search for transparency, you'll be able to get into all of this information, to include Arizona and other transparency websites. But in Arizona, I believe it is Arizona, what they did is they required every municipality within a certain allotted time that have a website, okay, to upload that information. The pensions, the wages, the health care, etc. Now, we do pay the third highest property taxes in the country. We have the highest bonded debt in the country. And the governor's proposal, as it relates to the car tax, and concurrently diverting the pilot funding and other funding that normally is sent to a town to pay the police, the fire, etc., that coupled with, on the other side of the equation, the fact that municipalities live under binding arbitration, collective bargaining agreements, so that here you have the governor affecting the revenue stream of towns, I'm leaving out boards of education, but towns on one side, and on the other side, you've crippled the CEOs of the towns, whether they are the mayor, the first selectman, town manager, whatever, and their legislative body, okay, through these binding arbitration laws. I know, I was mayor from '89 to 1993. I negotiated, I believe it was, the first no wage increase contract at the time. But at that time, I didn't mind being hated by the unions. And that is really the problem. It is a problem, I think, municipalities, we have 169, and also at the state level, where there's a failure to understand that there are two people sitting at the table, and there's a pot of money. That money's coming in from one side, it's called the taxpayer. On the other side, it's being distributed out to the unions. And across the board, for the 169 towns in the state of Connecticut, we pay 85% of our property taxes, 85% of our property taxes for personnel-related expenses. And the thing that I didn't hear discussed, and I did come in late, was the fact that we are already now locked in, thank you, Governor Malloy, to a 9% wage increase for state employees, concurrently no layoff.
Right.
You know, you could give a public employee a 50% wage increase, but always hold the fact that you can, ultimately say that I'm going to either fire, a few of you if you don't come back to the table and negotiate. These are legally binding agreements. There is absolutely nowhere the governor can go. There's only one place he can go, again, to the taxpayers of the state of Connecticut. Now, the perfect storm with what the governor has proposed, the elimination of the auto tax, concurrently withholding the pilot funding and other, while municipalities are forced to live under binding arbitration, would you agree, as a Republican leader and other Republicans at the Capitol, to propose, at least put on the table, open up the discussion to perhaps, I'm not going to say end collective bargaining, because I don't think we'll ever have that in the state of Connecticut, but at bare minimum, open up a frank and honest discussion as it relates to binding arbitration. When I was mayor, I had given up a car, and I had asked that all of the cars be brought back into the town and that they get their own cars. They had a couple weeks, 3 weeks, whatever, and they wouldn't be driving their town cars anymore. Well, I thought I was right because our contract did not speak to the issue of cars. I was wrong because it's past practice, and a lot of you may not know that. It doesn't have to be in the union contract. It can just be a side agreement and continue and on, and nobody may know that. No taxpayer, maybe not even some of the officials in a town, but lo and behold, they'll take you to arbitration and you will lose. I lost. That was so many years ago. I was giving a presentation in Trumbull, and an official had stood up and said, I thought your name sounded familiar. We're having the same problem here.
Right.
So it is across the board, and anything that you can do about that would be a great thing, because keep in mind, if the governor's plan comes to fruition, this is what will happen. The perfect storm will end up with more and more homes being lost to tax lien sales. You don't own your home, you rent it from a municipality. You don't pay your taxes, you will lose your home.
Well, thank you, Susan. When you hear the mayor of New Haven be very critical of the governor's budget, I think there's a positive sign that there may be bipartisan opposition to the governor's budget.
I would just add one other thing, and that is great to have nonprofits take over certain responsibilities. I think we now pay over $1 billion for nonprofits in the state of Connecticut. So if you want to give them more, that's fine. There's one little problem with that, and I know I've been before FOI with citizens who are concerned. There's no information that they can get from nonprofits.
Well, yeah, and look, I think as I talked about not being a dual delivery system, clearly you still have government oversight to make sure that the people who need to be cared for are cared for. So you would work within a system to make sure that the people can hold the nonprofits accountable for caring for the people and spending the state money. So
the nonprofit exists with 90% of its revenue coming from government. It should be subject to
don't disagree with you. And look, we have in all of our Republican budgets continued to push for a package of mandate relief. There's not universal agreement as how that mandate relief would look, but we will again put forth a healthy dose of mandate relief for towns and cities. Yes, sir.
Senator, I have a couple of questions. And thank you for coming to Enfield, and welcome to the Thompsonville section of Enfield.
Well, thank you. And thank you for your service, too.
Thank you. I found it interesting when you were talking about the Special Transportation Fund. Obviously, it was a good idea when it was established, but he can just, and I'll just let you answer later, he could just raid that. Maybe it's a process question. Just on his own, he has under his authority under, where does that authority come from?
No, he can't, and so I'll let you keep going, but let me just answer, no. He can propose that. It has to be passed as part of the budget by the legislature.
Okay.
I pointed out, and perhaps I should be equally critical of my Democrat colleagues in the legislature who voted to raid the STF. But I say that because Governor Malloy, when campaigning for governor, and when he was elected as governor and spoke before the General Assembly, said we're going to do things differently. And one of the things we're not going to do is raid the transportation fund. And he's done exactly that. So at least some of the Democrat colleagues who voted to raid it don't say, I'm not going to raid it.
To me, I would think that would have to be like a separate vote to even go there.
Oh, it's
a special
just
fund.
part of the budget.
It just goes in a line item, and it gets voted on as a whole.
Yes, and some of our revenue goes to the general fund, and it gets passed on to the Special Transportation Fund. So one of the things they'll do is not send as much money as they should. Another thing they'll do is they'll actually, from the money that goes directly into the SDF, take money out of it. But they've done it both. It has to pass as part of the budget.
Okay.
He cannot do that on his own.
And the other part was when you were talking about the bonding, I was looking at that like a financial statement. I wouldn't give the state a bond. I wouldn't. Your credit's got to be terrible. And with this issue the way it's going, the percentage of interest that the state's paying is probably going to increase because the picture doesn't look so well.
We have had negative outlooks from the rating agencies. There was a downgrade years ago, and that increases our cost to borrow, which increases our
So now he's bonding, he's borrowing to cover expenses, which is going to, it looks like it's not a good picture.
I think the rating
just from my little $4 million budget I have to do every year and have to balance it. It doesn't look too good.
No, I think the rating agencies will look very unfavorably on his budget. Now, we haven't passed it yet.
Right.
So I think if we were to pass his budget, they would look very unfavorably.
And then the other thing maybe you guys can look into is I found interesting you were saying about the employee contracts, because I believe under MIRA, the union ratifies, and then the elected body, like in the town of Enfield, the council ratifies. In the fire district, the commission ratifies. So both under MIRA, under the state act, I believe it's the elected level. So are you saying that just the governor can ratify the contracts?
We have how many days is it, John? Do you remember exact? We have I apologize. I should know the exact number, but we have a certain number of days upon which to act on those contracts. If we don't take action, they're good.
They're good.
Correct. So we don't act on them.
So it has to be brought. So it's not brought out.
Correct.
On the agenda. It's not on the agenda.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Gotcha. Very interesting.
The timeline will they'll sit on our calendar.
Yep.
They won't be called for a vote. The date will come.
Yep.
The
And you're right.
contracts are
Now that you say that in Mira, if the if the elected level doesn't act,
Right.
it is law in
and-
7.
And
It's
again,
true.
you know, look,
But the cities and towns are forced to follow.
they are, and I've said this, and again, I'm not afraid to say it in front of Marianne Turner.
Ooh.
A good idea, no, a good idea is a good idea, and if a Democrat has a good idea, I'll support it. Governor Malloy stood before the legislature, Democrats and Republicans, Democrat strong majority, in his first speech as governor, his first budget speech, and said we should stop the practice of not voting on union contracts.
Wow.
And the very first union contract he negotiated, when the Democrats said we're not going to vote on it, he said, that's okay.
Wow.
That's the type of stuff that we just need to stop.
Yeah.
We need to
Yep.
stop. It doesn't matter. I don't care who the governor is, Republican or Democrat. The legislature should vote in these contracts, have skin in the game.
Right.
If they vote for the
Yeah.
contract, then I can't stand up and say, you know what, I can't touch X billion dollars because it's tied up in a contract. And you can say, well, you voted for that contract.
You know, I tell my elected level when it's contract time, I say, look, this is your 3-year budget coming up here. You have to have input. You have to. I'll negotiate.
Right.
But I want some input from you. This is your 3-year budget because 90% of our cost is employees. So, you know, it seems like cities and towns are following the standard or held to a higher standard, and the state just gets away with, you know, dodging bullets, I guess. You know, it's kind of
There's no doubt cities and towns do a better job of their budgeting than the state does. Just as bad as we are, we do a better job. Than the
after
federal
tonight, and then, you know, in the last couple of weeks, it's been a great education process for me to leave Enfield and see how it works down there and have you come up here and explain some stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome.
It's,
And we'd like you to
definitely-
spend less time in the legislative office
Yeah.
building and more
It was-
time doing what you do.
Yeah, well, you know, sometime you got to go through the pricker bushes.
I hear you. Are there other questions out? Go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to leave you with this. First, a question. All the stuff we talked about tonight and that was brought up and the good questions we had, would you say that if the average taxpayer, Republican, Democrat, Independent in our state, was exposed to this
Yes.
meeting, that they would agree
cut
in
you-
principle that there's something that's got to be done?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I have no doubt. I have no doubt that a majority of citizens in Connecticut and a majority of people who go vote on Election Day would agree that this is
If they knew.
unsustainable, and we need to change
Okay.
our spending habits.
Reason I ask is, you know, I've been a town council for a year and a half, and a week after I was in the position, someone came to me on something we were talking about. I can't remember what it was, and said, "Well, you really can't do that. Why not?" Well, because, you know, it could cost you some votes if people perceived it the wrong way. It's a hot potato, one of those kind of things. And I went home shaking my head, and I said, you know what? I got elected by the majority of the people in my district to do the right thing for them. So my motto is I'm going to find out what the right thing is for them as a majority as the best I can, and I'm going to go fight for that thing. I'm not going to negotiate and cut my principles to make myself get elected again. If I don't get elected again, too bad, Tom. No problem. But I did it for you, and I did the right thing. And if that isn't good enough, then that's okay. I can live with that. I'm fine. But I'm going to always do the right thing. I'm not going to do something because I want to get along with someone necessarily, or keep people in the middle quiet, or foster voting, or any of that kind of thing. So I ask you guys, and I know John does this already, and I just met you tonight, so I assume you do too. Go back to your people and tell them,
Bless you.
when you go to bed at night, did you do this for what the majority of the people who would look at this thing we're talking about, whatever it is, guns, the budget, whatever, would they want me to do this? And if you can't answer it yes, somebody else has to take your job.
Well, look, and let me just, I'll only speak for myself. I found that if you're honest with people, even if you disagree, but you're willing to listen and have a straightforward conversation where the constituents you represent walk away respecting what you had to say, even though they disagree with you, you're more likely to get their vote than someone who may agree with you who doesn't respect the way you did business. So that's the message I give to any new elected official in our caucus. Be straightforward. Be honest with people. you know, don't tell them you're going to do something and then do something else, because even if, you know, that's the worst thing you can do as an elected official. Just be straightforward and honest. People will respect that. Even nobody's going to agree with you 100% of the time. Nobody's going to agree with you 100% of the time. Is it up already or no?
It is not up already. It'll be up by tomorrow morning.
It will be up by tomorrow morning.
John, before you leave, we haven't talked about guns. We've kind of let that big elephant sit quiet tonight. But I had some of the women in my North Central Connecticut professional business women. Actually, yeah, I know. I put it out that you were all going to be here tonight. And I started getting, I said, if you have a question, can't make it, send it on up to me. You're going to believe it, but my girls are all interested in guns. And one of them that was most interesting is, are you going to tax us out of our gun ownership? And you need to look at that through the whole picture versus taking our guns, the ammo issue, what type we can have. Are you going to hit liability insurance? I mean, the gambit you guys have gone down, and I am not going to say that the terrible tragedy should not be honored, okay, addressed. But I really have to believe you guys have gone a little off the deep end. And I'm very concerned for myself, but also from a lot of folks out here. I'd like to have you talk just a smidge about the gun issue.
I don't think there's a lot of support, even among the Democratic caucuses, for the ammunition tax. I don't think there's probably a lot of support for the insurance liability, some of those extra costs that you would see drive up the right to ownership. I do think you'll see a package of changes to our gun laws that include things like universal background check. Will include making sure that every time someone sells a gun, there's a background check done. Purchasing of gun would require a certificate of eligibility. Right now, you can go buy a long gun without any certificate of eligibility, which means you haven't been fingerprinted or have a background check. I do think you'll see those types of things. The most controversial issues are assault weapons bans and magazines. I don't know if we'll have bipartisan agreement on those issues. I do think there's a lot of support in the legislature for some version of those issues. And for me, I've fallen over the cliff more than he has, to use your words. It's a balance of making sure we protect people's right to bear arms, which is an absolute right to defend themselves in their home. Forget about the militia argument. It's a right to defend yourself in your home, and that's in the Connecticut Constitution, with limitations that are reasonable. And I'll be honest with you, you know I represent Newtown. I have friends who are in that school. I know parents have lost their kids, and parents whose kids ran by a terrible man with a gun while he was changing his magazine. And that's had a pretty profound impact on me. So I'm hoping we'll have a reasonable discussion on it. If we have a bill that you think goes too far and others think doesn't go far enough, I might think I'm in the right place. But there's a wide range of opinions in the legislature on that.
Senator, a quick question on the guns. I'm glad you brought that up. Maybe the Republican Party should follow the NRA. They seem to get thousands of people out. I mean, we get more of our people. But anyway, is there one bill that you see down here right now that if it was passed a year ago would have stopped the Newtown tragedy? And again, we all feel for those children. It's terrible what happened, but you know, there was a bill there already when I watched it on the TV. He tried to buy a gun. He was turned down. And the law reads that the next day the local police or state police should have been at his house asking him, why are you trying to buy a gun? They never followed up with that. But what bill right now can you pass that would avoid that tragedy?
Well, I think we need to just be careful about making assumptions about, did he try to buy a gun and was he turned down, or did he decline because he didn't have a hunting license and they told him there's a waiting period and wait for a report to come out. I don't use as a test whether or not, if we pass the law, it will prevent something bad from ever happening. We have a law against murder, and we don't stop murders. I mean, I know, okay? And I can't tell you that any bill that I voted for or that the legislature's passed in the past regarding guns or ones that we will do in the future can ever prevent that. we can get rid of every gun in the world, and someone could learn how to make a bomb on the internet in 5 minutes and attach it to their car and run into a school bus. So I respectfully don't use that as my test. I used.
Adding more regulation that we talked about, if it's not gonna stop a tragedy or stop someone from getting a weapon, an illegal person, a criminal, why are we passing these bills? It's gonna hurt us. Legal gun owners.
I think I respect your opinion, and I just think it has to be a balance between your right to defend yourself and own a gun, and what might, as a general public, we believe as a society, not universally, obviously, might be reasonable restrictions on that. We had an assault weapons ban, a magazine limit nationally from 1994 to 2004. There's certainly a lot of differences of opinion as to whether that had any impact or not, out there.
I just add to that.
Sure.
I have that own. My neighbor came to these big member of the NRA and he said, "Did you know, Tom, that your shotgun that you have in your home for self-defense is now going to come if this bill is passed?" And I don't know if this is true, but this is what I'm being told. My 7-round home action shotgun that has 7 rounds in it is now going to come a $10,000 fine and mandatory jail time for 5.5 years after this law is passed. Not because there's too many, shotgun shells in that shotgun. If it goes to that level, if that's really true, isn't that a little ridiculous?
Tom, I don't think something like that will happen. There was, there is a bill introduced by Ed Meyer, state senator from Brantford, Guilford area, which would basically prohibit the sale of anything other than a single shotgun. I don't think that bill will ever pass this year. I shouldn't say ever. I don't know what's going to happen 10 years down the road. That bill's not going to pass. New York did a magazine limit of 7. I don't know if they included shotguns, but that's not been a discussion in Connecticut. And a lot of the discussions that we try to have is separating, a hunter sportsman from other things. And so I think looking at shotguns is not something that's necessarily on the table. Where'd he go? Mayor, how are you? How did you walk in without me seeing you? How's your budget, Mayor? Okay.
As we told our senators, we've got some challenges with the proposed budget from about a $10 million hit to anything for revenue. So we've gotten a lot of them. But we'll be working with you folks to mitigate the damage.
Well, let's eliminate the damage and make sure you're not hurt at all. We'll try to do that. Go ahead, ma'am. Yep.
In the proposal offered by, one of the things that the good senator put me on was a subgroup
Come on up.
where we were dealing with gun issues. And the Republicans on that group had our list of proposals. I will say that we weren't going down the path of banning assault weapons or magazines, but we did have things like universal background checks and things like that. Frankly, I was surprised when I looked at the Democrats' sort of list, because they did have a ban, but they specifically carved out manufacturing. Now, from my perspective, it's a little hypocritical. And I also don't know how you can not offer for sale in Connecticut these magazines and weapons, and yet you're going to manufacture them, and how do you not offer for sale? So their sort of proposal is, we can still make it, and people in all the other states can buy it, but they want to say that you just can't own it in Connecticut. So that's sort of where it is, but now it's being discussed by people at a much higher pay grade than me.
Yeah, I guess there's a story, I haven't read it, I've only read the headlines, so that's a little dangerous to assume what's in the story, but I guess there was a story where Governor Malloy said he was willing to risk the companies leaving the state to pass the bills. I would hope that it's something everybody looks at, but I can't speak for others, so.
Say one thing, we're going to continue the discussion on the guns. I really didn't realize that competition. And when you started talking about that, I could see a change in your demeanor, and that really affected you. So
He was there that
I
day.
think
He was there that
this
day.
discussion should be for another day. I don't think it's
No,
fair to you
no,
to be
it's-
standing up here
no, that's all right.
talking
It-
about.
look.
But what I would say is that the background stuff and the checking of people is a very good idea, because, I mean, let's not even think about Newtown, the other stuff that's happened around the country, around the world. These are deranged people. These are sick people that have had problems with the law, or, you know, it could have probably been identified if they check people out. Because a good person's not gonna, legal gun owner's not gonna probably do that.
Well,
But
and mental health has to be,
I like to
no, it's
see
all right. Look,
this discussion.
I'm here. I'm going to stay here.
Imagine knowing
I'm not going to satisfy everybody, but I'm going to stay here till I can answer every question. And again, I'm still going to try to get him to help me answer some of them. But
again, I just seen how you reacted, and you know, maybe we can push this discussion for another day, because knowing people and being part of that community
right.
got to be really difficult.
No. Well, let's talk about it. No problem. This gentleman.
Legislative debate, the law debate, is that a lot of other states are farther along than us. When is Connecticut going to lead on any important piece of anything? We're not. And that's the only thing that bugs me. I don't care about, you know, whether or not it's the details of the law, but we're so far behind, we don't have anything ready for the floor yet, from what I understand. So get in gear. Get it done.
Well,
and it's for us, you know, whether you care if you have an AR-15 or a 7-round shotgun, I don't care. Just get, if it has to be done in phases, do it in phases. Get the stuff we need out there first to prevent the guns getting into the wrong people's hands. And frankly, you know, what my opinion is on guns is irrelevant. Just get it done.
And I think something will get done. I would just respectfully say that part of, and there are a lot of people who think we're moving too fast. I don't want to do what they did in New York and pass a law where their citizens wake up the next day and say, what did we do? And they're now actually looking at how they can unravel some of the stuff they've done. I'm proud that we've had 4 public hearings so far, and I think once we have a final bill drafted, we'll have another public hearing so people can see the language. I don't care whether it's 100 or 1,000 people that come up to the Capitol. You know, people express their opinions. Some, you know, I was even, heckled by some people at, events. That's fine. That's, I would much rather have all of that public participation, even if it takes us a little bit longer, than what they did in New York. But
Mine's just really quick about the assault weapons. If it does pass, will police departments in this state, along with military in this state, have to also abide by the same rules that a citizen would have to abide by?
All the proposals I've seen would exempt police officers and military.
So they'd pick and choose who can operate an assault rifle versus what. No, in other words, what he's saying is that one person is able to have this gun and more trusted than the citizen, say, who, I don't know, works at a social worker, teacher. That's what the law would say.
Yeah, that's been the tradition, is to exempt police officers.
And that's not there's no hypocrisy with that at all.
You know, from
no, I just see a little bit of hypocrisy with that. That's all. You know.
Defending us.
I said, okay, you want to exempt yourselves. What about when you're off duty? And they said, no, we want to have it when we're off duty too. To mine, that's like a little extra step. And how many times have we heard about some disgruntled police officer in a terrible divorce going and killing his wife or something like that? So, whatever they end up coming up with, we're going to have to really scrutinize it. By the way, I think we are moving very quickly. They are going to have a bill that's a compromise proposal. But I said, I'm lucky enough that Senator McKinney trusts me enough to be ranking senator on judiciary, and we raised, a half a dozen bills there that is an agglomeration of 97 different proposals. So whatever happens in the month of March, that's the first half of the story. We still have a lot of the story that's going to be written. And what doesn't get put in the compromise bill, I would suggest that there are folks down there in Hartford that probably will be pushing. I don't know whether they'll be successful, but certainly there'll be public hearings on a whole wide range of other things.
is that I think you are moving too quick. And the thing is, if it's all these crazy people that are killing people, and none of these bills are going to address that, and I haven't heard much about what's going to address this. You're not doing anything for the next tragedy to come along. But I watched State Rep D'Amelio had a town hall the other day, and I put up on YouTube. I was watching it, and he had a school teacher there. The guy's a registered Democrat, and he's an NRA member. And one of them asked him, "Why do you need 15 rounds? Can't you live with 10?" And his answer was pretty good. He says, "Senator or State Rep, who do you know that wants to live to be 100?" And he said, "What do you mean?" He says, "I'll tell you. It's the guy that's 99 years old. He wants to be 100. So taking away 5 bullets or 6 bullets is really not going to do anything for you. And you can see that down in Fort Hood, I think, where it was in Texas. He used all handguns down there. So how many he killed? 18, 20 people down there. Wounded 36 people. I think they have to slow it down a little bit. And this issue of the Second Amendment, believe it or not, is going to be very, very large in this next election. People are watching. Even a lot of Democrats will switch their votes because they're NRA members, and they want the right to bear arms. And again, it's for the militia. And again, if you take away, we can't have an assault weapon, but the cops and the military does, we're at a disadvantage right off the bat because that law is put there. When the British came to invade us and kill us, we fought them off with pitchforks. As we killed them with a pitchfork, we picked up their guns and used them against them because now it made it more level. But I think I'd slow it down a little bit. But all the Republicans in this state have to understand this is going to be a big issue at the next election. It's not going to go away. I think today you had over 3,000 people in Hartford today.
Right. Well,
and they weren't all Republicans.
And look, I think Tom's still here. Tom, I'll always remember Tom because he's wearing the Yankees jacket. Tom said do the right thing. So John Kissel's going to do what he thinks is right for his constituents. I'm going to do what I think is right. If I run for re-election, I'll stand before the voters as I do every 2 years, lay my record out, and this is not my state Senate seat. This is yours, people. So.
Don't pass any bills that aren't going to do nothing to help us in tragedy and mental people.
And all I could tell you is we have some disagreements about that. I am not going to stand up here and say that the gun laws we've passed or ones we may pass, whether I vote for them or not, that I could look at a parent in the eye and say, I can make sure this will never happen again. But nobody could ever do that. Nobody could ever do that. But we can try to use our best efforts to see if we can maybe minimize that from happening in the future. And there are a lot of other gun-related deaths and crimes that happen outside of Newtown. And they're happening every day, I think all of our goal, whether you agree or not, is to try to eliminate as many of those gun deaths, accidental, suicide, or homicide, as we can, and there's a lot of very strong opinions on both sides. There's no doubt about it, and I have not seen both sides as active as they are this year, and I don't think that's a bad thing.
We have cars that kill more people a year than speed limit is 65, and we make cars that go 120 miles an hour. I mean, every time you look at something, you just can't jump.
Aren't the majority of gun deaths happening in cities? And what is it that Giuliani did? There was something about the police in New York. They can sort of stop people that are suspicious. It's controversial, but do we have that here?
I don't know, and that's one of those. We're going to get your name and get your answer to that. But there are a lot of gun deaths in urban areas. I think Mayor Giuliani, I heard him speak in Danbury almost 2 weeks ago. And one of the things that he said is, and he probably would not be a favorite of some here for his positions on gun control. And he said, some have criticized, saying gun control doesn't work, look at Chicago. And his speech, and again, I'm just telling you what he said, was we had the same gun laws in New York, maybe even stricter than they had in Chicago, but we had far fewer gun deaths. We need to find out what he did. But, for example, we had, what was it called, John, the Gun Trafficking Task Force that we funded in Connecticut, that the funding was taken away. In the Republican proposal, we talked about putting $1 million as a marker in that program. That is to help fund local police who will go after and confiscate guns from criminals. So there are things that we probably should be doing, and we'll actually get some specifics on what he did in New York and get back to you. Did you have a question, ma'am? Yep. Oh, okay.
That's fine. That's fine. But I'm talking about the universal background checks, that type of information. And you know what? It's quite possible that I've been misinformed by reading the Hartford Courant. It would be the first time a citizen that happened.
Yeah.
So put it out there. You know, I'll go through the websites and stuff, but let's get some more. Maybe communications is what we need.
And I
not
think
speed, but communications would be good.
Brett, do you have that? What's the name of our task force website?
Sure, it's give me 1 second.
Okay, one.
It's a safer. It's www.cga.ct.gov/a-safer-Connecticut.
Is it on? Is there a link to my website?
Yes. And there's a link directly
Okay.
from his website.
So
There's
and that'll give you the proposals put forth by the task force, and there were 3 subcommittees. One was on school security, one was on mental illness. Those 2 subcommittees reached a series of bipartisan proposals in areas where there's disagreement. And quite frankly, I think we need to do a lot more talking and working about mental health issues as well. And the gun task force did not. And there are a series of Republican proposals and Democrat proposals that you can see on there. And it's all hard. It's all hard stuff. But, and you know, it wouldn't surprise me if we get something wrong. And as long as we're not violating the Constitution and the rights that people have, which I think there are reasonable limits to those rights, you know, and if something doesn't work, we should go back and look at it again.
One of my colleagues is sitting on the committee, Dennis McCarthy, the chief of
Sure, good guy. Every Friday he's up there. The governor appointed him to his task force. From, I want to say he's from Norwalk. Good guy. Yeah, good guy. Yes, sir.
I think one thing that should be looked at is when a crime is committed with a gun, the laws should be enforced, whether it's a legal gun or an illegal gun. That person should be put in jail for the possible longest time they can. And that's not happening now. You see so many crimes where it's not enforced, the times. And the other thing that I've brought it up before, but I've never heard anybody else talk about it, and that is securing the guns. If the gun had been secured in most cases, this person or person with doubtful background wouldn't have been able to get it. And if you make the people liable, and I understand that there was nobody left in that family, you know, to be liable, but the point is that if you make people, that's right. Well, we know because he got the gun. Nobody, it doesn't matter. Then it wasn't secure.
Well, I think, look, no, I'll let you finish. Go ahead. But
I'm just saying that
right.
Anybody with a gun should be held responsible for keeping the gun secure, and especially when they know that there's a person with mental problems in the household.
Right.
Discuss that.
Right, and
both sides, Republican and Democrat, agree on some of those.
Right, there are some storage responsibilities if there are children in the house. We want to expand those if there, you know, if there's someone who's ineligible to have a gun and the like in the house, and you know, I would not want to use respectfully the test that if someone got them, that doesn't mean they were secure. Someone could have their gun locked up. And you know, the lock could be broken or whatever, and I wouldn't want to charge that person with not having their gun secured. You know, safe storage laws are important. I think we'll look at that. In terms of enforcing the law, look, John Kissel, more than anyone, has led the fight against things like early release credits. And we certainly have put on the table and will continue to put on the table that if you've committed a gun crime and a serious violent crime, you should not be eligible to get out of jail early, period.
Especially when it costs less to keep a prisoner than it does in a prison hospital. John, I'd like to say something
Yeah.
about John Kissel. I'd like to thank him on the radio. He does a great job with that, and I think John proved his point when they had the early release on the guy. Was it in Milford or somewhere where the guy went to the gas station, he just got out, and he murdered a couple people or one guy. So what you said was right, but they keep letting these idiots out of jail in these nutcases. They kill somebody, and they want to come after everybody's guns. But you were perfect on that, John. You hit it perfect. It was a good job. And actually, I want to go back to another quick story with the Pettit family. I mean, that was the first tragedy right there, what they did to these people. I went down, and it was a Judiciary Committee, and I said to John, I'm going to come down. I just sat up there, me and a friend of mine, James Brislin, and it was packed. So I got one seat up on top. And I'm sitting there, and I'm talking. I said, geez, look at this place is packed. And John was down there, and I started talking to the guy next to me. I says, what do you think? How's it going? He says, well, I'm waiting to testify. I goes, you are? I said, why aren't you down there? He says, well, I'm Dr. Pettit, and I'm not going to let me get too close. And I remember I told you, John, he was sitting way up top because the Democrats, I guess, really didn't want to hear what he had to say, how his family was just brutally murdered. So there are things that we're working on, and John, thank you for that. And you fought that to the maximum. Didn't work because the Democrats outvoted us, but you were right.
Yeah, he was. And Dr. Pettit's a remarkable man who's been through a lot. Yeah. Yeah. And you know, there were members of the legislature who just refused to meet with him, which is surprising.
I couldn't believe it. He was sitting there.
Again, even if you disagree, respect the man to at least sit down and talk to him. But
So I think you outlasted him.
did I outlast him?
I think you did.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Any closing comments, Senator?
No, I just want.
Where are we going to dinner?
I know you gave Senator McKinney a round of applause. I will say this. You may not agree with either one of us. I'm certainly, our monthly meetings, you don't hold back, and that's a good thing. Keeps my feet on the ground. But the fact that he, on his own volition, is doing this listening tour, talking about the budget, made sure that he came to Enfield right at the beginning and was willing to field any question, tells you why I think he's fabulous as a leader.
Well, thank you.
He's not dodging any bullets. He's not doing any other.